So welcome everybody. Welcome to your 1-hour workshop entitled Be a Better Leader by Learning How to Coach Cleanly. Some of you might be wondering what this word cleanly means, and if so, you're in the right place. I'll tell you now, I'm not meaning don't swear. There's a lot more to it. The subtitle explains a little more. This is a coaching approach, very much aimed for leaders to inspire some creativity in your people. We're going to cover a lot of questions, techniques, and ways for you to work as both a leader and a coach. And I know some of you are teachers, in a way that keeps you out of the conversation. Most people involved in coaching know that there is this preference to work non-directively as a coach. We want our coachees to find their own solutions. However, to ask questions that are truly non-directive isn't as easy as it sounds, because when we're having a conversation with somebody, we can't help but introduce our own assumptions, biases, opinions, suggestions, wrapped up in the language that we use. So this thing called clean is all about stripping our language of anything that might inadvertently influence how our coachee chooses to respond. Sounds easy? Well, it's simple, but not necessarily easy, as you'll discover as we go through. So I'm going to begin today with just a very quick summary of my journey of leadership. So I was first found myself in a leadership role some 30 years ago. I did particularly well in sales and marketing, and suddenly found myself managing a very large group of business development managers and telemarketers. I was overwhelmed. I knew very little about leadership and management, and what had been a strength of mine, which was my ability to throw myself 100% in everything I do, actually suddenly became a bit of a weakness, because I couldn't help but be in every conversation that I was having. I was in my own head all the time. And so I developed my own form of a leadership style, which was managing by making people feel sorry for me. So I'm not particularly proud of that. I've moved on a long way since then and developed some better leadership styles. But back then, another kind of core of who I was has run through over the years, which was a weakness, which I think has ultimately become a strength. And that was, I had a bit of an annoying habit of asking stupid questions. And by that, I mean, I was the person at every leadership meeting when people were talking about the latest buzzwords and the topic of the day, using jargon, referring back to things that happened in the past. I was the one that would put my hand up and say, well, but what does that mean? What exactly is that? And people would roll their eyes because the meetings would go on that much longer, because I was asking a series of questions about what everybody knew was all about. However, after we asked a few questions, we discovered that not everyone had the same understanding. Meanings were different. And those so-called stupid questions actually were valuable for everyone. Little did I know then that that would become the cornerstone of my work today. And so-called stupid questions asked of things that everybody knows can actually reveal wise and transformational answers. So just track forward a little bit. So that was 30 years ago. In the 1990s, I started my own business as a trainer and a consultant, and ran many leadership development programs, and gradually morphed over to doing more one-to-one coaching than the kind of standing talk and chalk stuff. in the noughties, I got involved with the Association for Coaching. And again, I threw myself into that 100% volunteering to support in every way I could. I ended up setting up co-coaching forums around the country, became head of professional forums, and found myself on the board of directors with the Association for Coaching. So I was a leader again. And this time I had a large group of volunteers that I needed to lead. And this time I found that that passion and vision and how I wanted things to be was really helpful as a leader. Moving on from there, I discovered clean language around about that time, and very quickly became convinced that it was really what I wanted to make my life's work. I got involved with firstly training with whoever I could to learn more about clean language and clean coaching. One particular person was Carol Wilson, who you may have heard of. She's a bit of a coach, performance guru and writer, and she was working closely with David Grove at the time, who was the creator of clean language. So I got involved in partnering him in the Clean Coaching Centre. This is back in the noughties, as I say. Sadly, he passed away, leaving me with the Clean Coaching Centre, where I've been ever since. So that gives you a little taste of background on me, and I've also given you maybe a flavour of what clean coaching is all about. The Clean Coaching Centre, you'll see, appears on the bottom of all the visuals. We have got so much to get through today. Please keep in touch. If you're as inspired with this topic as I was back then, do get in touch, ask questions, visit our website. We run regular training courses. There's a foundation level course coming up in May. So if it's something that you want to learn more about, now is a really good time to look at what we've got coming up. So today's content, for those of you that are here earlier, I said we're going to make this as participative as possible. We're going to do some little demonstrations where you'll hear some examples and see some examples of clean coaching in action, starting with a blank slate is what we're going to do initially. And I'm going to do a group demonstration with as many of you who are willing to play with me, so that you all experience some clean coaching questions. After that, the other topics we'll do maybe some one-to-one exploration. So I'm hoping some of you will be willing to have some questions asked of you in a coaching style, to encourage you to open up, to tap into creative thinking. What to do when the coachee is stuck. I'll demonstrate that if it happens. Otherwise, I've got some ideas to talk through with you. And finally, ending with a clear action plan. So assuming all of you are leaders in one shape or form, how is it that leaders coach, and how is what we're going to cover today going to be useful to you? Well, first of all, we're all leaders in a way. In whatever we're doing, we're leading ourselves as well as in any conversation. So we all are coaching in a way, in a conversational fashion. And what I'm going to present today, some of the questions you could use in an everyday conversation. When you want to have the other person kind of call the shots and give them the opportunity to explore what's happening for them without your influence affecting them. So conversationally, and for many of you, there'll also be some conversations that you can have in a more formal manner, so on purpose, where you might have the opportunity to contract with your coachee. So some of you might be coaches, so as part of your job description, and the techniques that I'm going to cover, if you're going to use in the complete form, I would advise that you do some contracting and let them know that you're going to be coaching them. Let them know, set a time limit on what you're going to do, responsibilities, and also expectations. You'll hear as we go through the workshop, some of these clean coaching questions sound a little unusual. They're not your everyday conversations. And for that reason, it's worth explaining to people that they might be asked something they've never been asked before. And in doing so, it can help them get to some unique answers. Um, so let's begin with our first topic, an exercise for today, which is starting with a clean slate. So as I say, we're going to do a group demonstration, and once we get going, I will stop my screen share so we can see all of you. In order to do this, you'll need a paper and pen. So have a quick look. Have you got something that you can use? Ideally, a kind of single piece of paper rather than as part of a notebook, and something to write on. It doesn't work so well if you're just typing straight into a tablet or something. I am going to ask you some clean questions so you can experience them. They're cleanish questions. I've made something that's a little bit more conversational and easy for you to use in your everyday conversations for this exercise. And we're going to do it totally in silence and content free, which is why I'm going to work with all of you. And you can consider how you could adapt this small exercise. Well, you could use it in a group, but also you can use it in a one-to-one with someone. Because it can be content free, your coachee could choose to remain completely silent. And if they do share with you what's happening for them, you still ask the same questions. You are not influenced by their answers. You have a little structure which keeps you from inadvertently influencing what's going on. Okay, so let me stop my share for a moment. Here we go. I lost my stop share button. Right, lovely. I can see you all. And let's take a moment or two to just reflect on what's happening now for you. Think about your role and what you do. And how is it now? What have you been noticing in your role? And where would you like to give some attention to today? And with that as it is now, how would you like it to be? How would you like it to be? Okay, and when you know, put that down on your paper in any way that you would like. Okay, and with that on your paper, what do you know about that? What do you know about that? And you could put that down too. And now, what are you noticing about what's on your paper? What are you noticing? What do you know about that? And is there anything else that could go on your paper now? And if there is, just put that down too. And what do you know now? Okay. So we'll bring that short demonstration to a close. Thank you, those of you that were able to keep your webcams on. It was useful to be able to see some of you. Would anyone like to share what happened? And you can say out loud. I think we're a small enough group that certainly at the moment, I'll let you take yourself off mute to say something.
Hiya, Angela, it's Becky.
Hello, Becky. Hi.
So I might be an awkward one because I was writing them all down and I had no answers. And that makes it quite tricky. And I think that just reflects sort of where I am at the moment. I don't know what my work plan is.
Okay.
Don't seem to have a plan, don't particularly know what I want next.
Okay.
So yeah, my answers are quite blank.
Okay. And did you put that on your paper that you don't know what your work plan is? Did that go on your paper?
Yeah, right at the bottom I put,
okay.
Don't know where going, no plan, don't know what I want.
Okay. And when it's like that, how would you like it to be?
Oh, I like a plan.
You like a plan. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like a plan. I like to know where I'm going, where I'm heading, what I need to do to get there. I'm a list person.
Okay.
And out of that puts me out of control almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite uncomfortable to be in that situation.
Okay. And you'd like a plan?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Becky. This is not the whole thing. This is just a start. And thank you for sharing that. Anyone else like to share what happened for them?
I don't mind. Yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
Sorry, somebody put a hand up. I was a bit rude.
Oh, Kate, yes, I didn't see. Well, we'll do both of you. So Tamsin, we'll hear from you and then we'll hear from Kate.
Mine went a bit blank, and then I just, how you would like it to be, just suddenly I thought I want to make quicker progress. So going through the other questions, then it's like, what do you know about it? It's like, I'm just following too many procedures and there's too many moving parts at the moment, and sort of got down to realizing I was tired of box ticking.
Okay.
And then so what do you know now? Right at the end, it was just like, I've got to think about how I'm working.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's quite helpful.
Thank you, Tamsin. It's can be quite amazing what can come out of those few questions. And of course it is, you are starting with a completely blank slate in that I'm not really giving you any clue or direction on where you take those questions. So, you know, picking up on what Becky said, for some it might be uncomfortable, but what it's going to do is surface what really matters. Kate, what was happening for you? Kate, if you just take yourself off mute. Can I take you off mute? Something should come up on your screen now. That's it. Lovely.
That's better. Thank you. Interesting. The first thing that came to my mind was frustration by red tape and hierarchy. Little background, I work in the NHS. And some of the questions is, I want some of the processes to be easier It feels like there are so many steps and levels to be able to do anything, to process anything, to get to the next steps.
Yeah.
I just want it to be easier and simpler. But when you're in such a massive organisation that's entrenched in its ways, it can be tricky. But then it was the question of, what do you know about that, or how would you like? What do you know about that? It's it was a more of a self-reflective thing rather than organisational. It's how I need to show that I can prove myself.
Okay.
Make it easier.
Yeah.
But then then next sort of what else is, why don't I feel valued? And that's a really big thing. Yeah. And that's how a lot of my staff and the people that I work with feel at the moment. It's I am not feeling valued for the bloody hard work that we do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kate. And when you are not feeling valued, what would you like to have happen?
It's recognition.
Okay.
Actually, the work that you do work very hard.
Yeah.
But it seems to get swept under the carpet and go, okay, well, you've done that, next job. Thanks, I've just worked really hard to get all of that done.
And have you put recognition on your paper?
I think it falls into the why don't I feel valued, but it's that it does fall into recognition.
And put recognition down on your paper too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to carry on sharing my screen now, and we'll show you the questions that we went through and explain a little bit more about the rationale behind them. So they were adapted from, some of them are clean coaching questions, some are little adaptations that I've done for today. We got into this by saying what's happening now for you in your role. If you were using this as part of a conversation, your coachee would be telling you what was happening, and you could look for the opportunity to move through the rest of the questions. What have you been noticing? We're avoiding anything that gives any kind of influence on how we want the person to process the question. So I'm a very visual person, so I'd naturally say, what have you been seeing? What do things look like for you? Those kinds of questions work for me. But for someone who's more of a kinesthetic, feelings-oriented person, or a sound and voice-oriented person, a question about what things are going to look like is not going to land well. So we take any mention of any senses out of it and just talk about what they're noticing. So again, we're cleaning up the questions. What would you like to give some attention to today? So we're bringing it into a focus. And then the key question that I asked was, and with that as it is now, how would you like it to be? As you know, with coaching, even though it's non-directive, coaching is not directionless. The aim of coaching is always towards what our coachee wants, not what they don't want. So with this question, we can very quickly establish a desired outcome, rather than have a person stuck in problem mode, which is often what happens. Now, a lot might go on the paper, and we're inviting them to put it on a piece of paper. And what is the point of that? I mean, with a group, it works very well because it enabled you to kind of interact with yourself, if you like. But that also works really well, even if you're one-to-one with someone, because we do want them to begin to interact with their own kind of experience, their own inner reflections, rather than kind of bounce off you. And by putting it down on paper, it depersonalizes, it takes them out of the experience so they can actually look at it. It often means that once someone starts looking at what they've written on a piece of paper, they begin to notice something different about it and can untangle themselves from the problems they're experiencing. There's also a lot of research out there to say that once you put your goals down on paper, you're far more likely to achieve them. For starters, it starts to clarify not only what the issue is, but what you'd like to do about it, with the how would you like it to be. So very quickly, without you setting any kind of agenda, without you steering the conversation, we can get to the heart of what really matters to your coachee. So there was a couple of other questions towards the end. I was inviting you, is there anything else that could go on your paper? And what do you know about that? So again, giving some sense of ownership and empowerment to the person. You know, whatever they've put on their paper, they know something about it. In fact, they probably know more than they think they know. And by cycling through these two questions, again, if they're saying they're giving you an answer out loud, you still carry on asking these questions. You don't get drawn into a conversation. Just continue to ask those questions. And it becomes like an iterative feedback loop in that each time they put something on their paper about what they know, it's almost like it releases something else that they know about. And that can get added on layer by layer. And it is quite amazing what can come out of that in a short space of time. I think you can do this reasonably conversational. I was trying to do that in a group scenario. And as I say, if you're going to work with someone for a dedicated amount of time, you could also contract and say, look, we're going to be working with paper. I'm going to kind of aim not to influence you and just ask you some questions so you can really focus on what's important to you and gain permission. Would that be okay today? All right. So let's step back a bit. I've given you a taste of what clean coaching is all about. Let's just step back and talk a little bit more about it. Have we got one more question at the bottom there now? Yeah, so what is clean coaching? So you've probably heard me say the term clean language as well. Clean coaching was created by New Zealand psychotherapist David Grove. Back in the 80s, he created clean language. A couple of NLP psychotherapists, UK-based, James Lawley and Penny Tompkins, got behind clean language and they brought it out to the wider world, to businesses. Many of you may have already heard of that term, clean language. About this time that Penny and James were taking clean language into the wider world, David Grove himself was evolving his processes. So he carried on and went beyond language and developed this thing called emergent knowledge with clean coaching, which incorporates this idea of iterative questions that act like a feedback loop that I've just briefly explained, and also using space as a container for exploring what's happening, where a person's inner world gets projected into the space around them. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do anything on space today, but we are doing a little bit of this iterative emergent knowledge with you. So as I've already said, what is the point of clean coaching? It's all about taking yourself out of the questions. We all influence without meaning to. I mean, as a leader, of course, you often want to influence. You want to put your ideas across. I'm influencing you now with my explanation and presentation. However, if I'm coaching one-to-one, then what I want to happen is for the other person to have an opportunity to explore their own ideas without my influence. And by exploring finding their own path and exploring that path, then answers become available to them that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And they find solutions that work for them because they've come up with themselves. And often people will get to a eureka moment, that moment of insight when now it makes sense. And sometimes that's as simple as a reframing from a problem to actually, I know now what I want to have happen, whether it's a plan, whether it's recognition. Knowing what you want is the first step in making something happen. And that's very different to being told what would help you. So I'm just going to run through a few concepts as to what clean coaching is all about and explain a little bit more about how you can use it. So at its simplest level, what clean coaching is a set of non-directive questions. You've seen some already. And unlike other coaching processes, You can't play around with these questions and phrase them differently because you think they'll sound nicer. The whole point of the question is that they have been carefully stripped of anything that could be influencing your coachee. You know, we all inadvertently embed our language with our opinion, even though we don't realize. I mean, you've only got to look at the list of topics for today to see how I'm influencing the topics I'm covering. You know, one of the topics we're covering later is tapping into creativity. Well, how do I experience creativity when I describe it as something that you tap into? We all reveal something about our own personal and individual way of seeing the world from the metaphors that we use in our language. And on average, the average person uses something like 6 metaphors a minute. You just don't notice most of them because they're just part and parcel of how we speak. These questions are designed to make sure that you don't introduce those metaphors. Why? Well, I might talk to someone about creativity, and tapping into works very well. You know, like me, they might imagine creativity as like sap from a tree that you tap into, or like a precious metal ore in a mining cave. But for others, that metaphor might land cold. And if I was to say to them, for instance, well, how do you tap into your creativity? I am limiting their choice of response. I am kind of biasing through my question on where they might go with that answer. So that can't happen. If you're using clean coaching questions, you ask the questions just using the words that are given, interspersed only with the coachee's own words. So as well as being a set of questions, I guess you've got like a scaffold or a framework, and you'll see some of those next, where we're going to build the coachee's own words into these very simple questions. Now, as I said earlier, simple doesn't mean easy. If you start to practice using these questions, and I hope you will after this session, you'll discover how it can be quite challenging only to ask one of these questions, because when you're in a conversation with someone, you'll notice that little itch in you to say something else, to introduce something that you've noticed, share something of yourself. So to my mind, one of the key benefits of clean coaching is that it introduces discipline. It teaches you to notice when you are influencing someone. And hey, sometimes maybe you'll decide that is entirely appropriate. As a mentor, for instance, you'll want to share your experience and your know-how. But if you are attempting to follow a coaching role, you do not want to do that. And you can notice that itch to say something and stop yourself and instead ask a clean coaching question. So when is that most important? Well, I think when you're coaching someone and you know a lot about their situation. Maybe it's someone you work closely with, maybe you've been in their position. It's very easy for you to subtly influence them so they come up with the same kind of solution that you would have done yourself, missing the opportunity for something new to emerge. The other time that you might want to use these questions is right at the beginning of a conversation, right at the beginning of a meeting, in the way that we did in that short demonstration, because it means that the agenda is set by the other person rather by inadvertently a throwaway comment or a casual mention by you, which has kind of steered the conversation to one way or another. Once you've influenced somebody, it's very difficult to backtrack, even though you might say, oh, no, let's not, we can talk about whatever you want. You know, suggestions are suggestible. You know, you kind of produce this suggestive effect, which kind of then steers the conversation, and you can't undo it. So you can use these questions, just a couple, 2 or 3, without necessarily contracting to coach, but introduce some of the questions we're covering today to just clean up your act a bit and let the other person own more of the agenda. If you choose to ask more questions in a sequence, then you now have a process to encourage some introspection. Introspection is a word that's fallen out of favor, but was very popular with cognitive psychologists a number of years ago as a process of reflecting on what's happening in your own mind. You know, noticing what's happening in your mind's eye. And we all have our imagination. We all have the kind of the canvas on which our thoughts, feelings, experience are overlaid. You know, it's happening in there all the time, but most conversations focus on what's happening out there. Clean coaching gets somebody to notice what might be happening inside and helping them to put that down in the examples that we've done so far on paper. Why? Because we know much more than we think we know. A good quote from Nancy Klein, author of Time to Think. And by just allowing somebody to have the space to explore what they know can make them more intelligent. You know, how often do we really get the opportunity to explore our own thoughts, feelings, and experiences without something else getting in the way? Not very often at all. Finally, if you're to use clean coaching and learn how to use it in a skillful manner, what you have is a method to access creative insights. This time by asking questions specifically of the metaphors that the other person is inadvertently using, because those metaphors hold the key to how they are structuring their thoughts and experiences about this thing. So I gave the example earlier, you know, me using that term tapping into creativity. That's only one way to access creativity. If I were to explore that tapping into, I'd learn more about how I perhaps access creativity. And by exploring that metaphor, it can open up the doorway to different and unique ways of aiding me to get more creative, for instance. So we're doing a little bit of that on the rest of the session today, so you can see that happen in action. Yeah, I'm just going to end all of that with the quote from Einstein. All this is about helping somebody to emerge their own ideas. As to paraphrase Einstein, you're not going to solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created it. But in order to get to another level, again, metaphor rich here, you firstly have to understand the level you're on. So this coaching approach is all about helping somebody to notice how they are experiencing something so that they're then able to break out of the box, that self-imposed box that holds their you know, their reality together. By understanding what's in the box now helps them to be able to get outside of that. Okay, so let's do our next exercise, encouraging coachees to open up. So again, this is just going to be 2 or 3 minutes of a handful of clean coaching questions. And it would be great if we'd have somebody who might volunteer to have some questions asked of them. So again, I'm going to stop sharing. And would anyone be happy to have some questions asked of them? And we'll pick up with something that you've already started working on your paper. Anyone up for doing that?
I always get uncomfortable with people waiting, but I'm happy unless anyone else wants to do it.
All right. It would be lovely if that's okay. Are you comfortable to do that, Becky?
Yeah.
Super. So if I can invite everybody to switch their webcams off, and that means we can just see myself and Becky. And so, as I say, this is just going to be 2 or 3 minutes. So to recap, what's on your paper now?
I'm the tricky one. So I don't have a plan.
You don't have a plan. Okay. And when you don't have a plan, what would you like to have happen?
I want a plan.
You want a plan. Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of plan is that plan?
I want to know what it is that I want to achieve out of my work and how I can progress with it.
Okay. What it is you want to achieve and how to progress.
Yeah.
And what kind of progress is that?
Well, from an educational context and also heading towards sort of leadership.
Okay.
Yeah.
Educational to leadership.
Mm.
And what do you know about that progress from educational to leadership?
Well, my hope is that the more education I have, that will lead to more open doors, more possibility, and what I would hope would come with it is the more knowledge I have, then the aspiration of becoming leader will be more helpful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. And the more knowledge, the aspirational, and that progress, more possibilities.
Yeah.
And the plan, you want to know what it is you want to achieve.
Yes.
And is there anything else about what it is you want to achieve?
Not the only thing, but one of the things that interests me is to have more of a coaching role, to be involved more in coaching.
Yeah.
Both in my current role and to be able to use it outside of work from a personal perspective.
Okay.
I don't necessarily mean with family, because I know that's difficult, but actually thinking about it from a business perspective, there's potential.
Okay, so to have more of a coaching role.
Yeah.
And what do you know now about your plan?
Well, I believe that I'd be better getting an ILM 5 because I have an ILM 3 in coaching at the moment. And I need to have a look at other areas of teaching qualifications that I require, or coaching qualifications more than teaching. Teaching I've got. More so in relation to working with children and coaching.
Okay. Okay, good. Is that an okay place to pause?
Yeah.
Thank you, Becky.
No problem.
So we're going to show you what we did there, and with an eye on the time, we're going to need to kind of whiz through fairly quickly so that we cover everything that's on our agenda today. What did you notice? All of you, just reflect on what you heard, what questions I asked, and what you think might have been going on for Becky, and we will check in with Becky in a moment. So these were clean coaching questions. I just oriented back to get a summary of what was on the paper. Things might have evolved from what she said before. And you may have noticed I was repeating back her exact words. I wasn't paraphrasing. I was holding her in her own experience. I didn't have to repeat back everything that was said, but just a few key words to help hold Becky in her own experience. And then I circled round just a few very simple questions. One, and this is when you notice people are getting stuck. If they tell you what the problem is, you can repeat the problem exactly as they give it and ask, and when, I think I did it with Becky saying she didn't have a plan, what would you like to have happen? Now you might think, well, it's you know what she wants a plan, but it doesn't always follow that the outcome is the reverse of the problem. Sometimes people say something very different. So that means we're focusing on the solution. And then I asked just a couple of very simple questions, again, incorporating Becky's words. What kind of plan is that plan? What kind of progress is that progress? And I was also asking, is there anything else about that coaching role, about that advance? Just picking up on some of the key aspects of what was being said. Now, again, this is about opening up. It's not about getting to a solution yet, but I hope you can see it very quickly helped establish what this was all about. And there was also another one of these, what do you know about that questions, to help collect up what is already known about this. So if I stop share for a moment, Becky, how was that for you?
You know, from somebody that said they didn't know where they were going, they didn't have a plan, it is clear to show that actually you do, with the right questions, you do know what you're looking for. And I think actually I've got to thank Kate for being so honest about what she said earlier, because actually I felt some of her frustrations as well, currently where I work, and it's very easy to get pulled down into that route instead of thinking, right, what can I actually do about it? But the questions, they felt difficult, but they were okay to answer, because I knew that if I got stuck, I felt comfortable enough that you would be able to unstick me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know is a perfectly legitimate answer to any question, and that's information. And if somebody were to say, well, I don't know, I could say, and when you don't know, what would you like to have happen? And again, that just helps switch that focus from the problem to a potential solution without me sticking my oar in and making any kind of suggestion or hints or model or whatever else might get into that frame. Thank you so much, Becky. I'm going to move on and share the next part of today. If there's any questions, pop them in the chat. We might have a moment or two towards the end to do something around that. So we're going to do another short demo, this time on tapping into creative thinking. Would anyone else like to have a go at having some questions asked of them around tapping into creative thinking? Anyone like to volunteer?
Angela, it's Nimisha. I'm okay.
Lovely. Okay. So we're going to need to do this fairly briefly. So appreciate we're going to whiz through this very quickly. So those of you not speaking, if you could take yourself off the camera, that would be lovely. And so, Misha, what was on your paper?
On my paper was, I'd like to look more at my learning journey.
Okay.
I feel that I'm now in a position to pick up learning of some sort.
Okay. And you'd like to look more at your learning journey?
Yes.
And when that happens, what happens next?
Then I believe I can decide, with all the skills that I've got, where my future is lying, and where I'd like to go with all my skills.
You can decide with all the skills you've got, where your future is going. And for you to decide with all your skills, you need to be like what?
I'd say open to what's crossing my path. And by open, I mean opening my eyes, not closing things down to possible opportunities that may lead somewhere.
Okay. Opening your eyes and not closing things down.
Yeah.
And is there anything else about opening your eyes?
I knew you'd ask me that. Yeah. Well, 7 years ago, I was made redundant out of the blue. And I've got to be completely honest, knocked me for six, knocked my confidence. And it's only now when I'm attending things and training courses I'm taking, I'm starting to remember that actually I'm good from comments and believing that. So I think opening my eyes is accepting that I can do these things. I can do lots of different things. Maybe I've just got to look at the direction I'm going in. So yeah, opening my eyes is about me, really. Opening my eyes to me, my skills and what I'm good at.
Opening your eyes to you.
Mm.
And remembering actually you're good.
Yeah.
And accepting that you can do these things.
Yeah.
And accepting. What kind of accepting is that?
Accepting is, for me, I think it links back to that, back to me more. Accepting that I have the ability, I have the skills, I have the recognition that people come back to me with. So I guess it's accepting that those skills are within me. So it's for me, how deep do I dig to bring them out? For that, it all connects with that opening my eyes again. I'd say to look into me a little bit more and remember what I am good at, and what roles I have played, and bring those skills back out again.
Yeah. And bring those skills back out again, and accepting that they're inside you. And when they're inside you, whereabouts inside you are they?
Sorry, I'm laughing. My head's going down that way. They are a gut feel. They're deep. I know I'm very kinesthetic, so I'm driven by stomach, I would say. So that everything is held within that area for me.
It's a gut feel in your stomach.
Okay. Yeah.
And is that an okay place to pause?
Yes.
Thank you. With these little short coaching sessions, it's hard to pull out, but that's what we're going to do. So let's look at the questions that were asked then, some unusual questions. Bearing in mind this is building on what's gone before. Again, I just oriented back to what's on the paper to get a summary of what this was all about for Misha, who wanted to look at more at her learning journey. That didn't really sound like an aim, it sounded like something to do. So I did ask a question that's not on my visual, which is then what happens, which took her to deciding with all her skills, where her journey is going. So then I said, and for that to happen, you need to be like what? And this is one of the magic clean coaching questions from Clean Language, where we're asking for a metaphor. You need to be like what? Not what's that like? You need to be like what? And generally, people will give you a metaphor because you're asking for a comparison. And sure enough, Misha came up with about opening her eyes. She doesn't really mean opening her eyes. Of course, her eyes are open in the real world. This is a metaphoric opening. So we're now working at quite a deep level of what's going on inside. And I hope you could see my preference coming out there. I hope you could notice what was going on at quite a deep level for Misha. So again, very simple questions building on what you've heard before. It's easy Or it could be easy to ask these questions if you just stop yourself getting in the way. So we had what kind of, and is there anything else about? These two questions are something like 60% of the time in clean language. So it's very easy to do a good job if you just stay out of the way. I didn't ask this question about shape or size, but I did ask a whereabouts question. Misha noticed that the accepting that the skills were inside her. And so I was able to help her to connect to that gut feel. And that can be a very powerful revelation for somebody to really anchor a good state that they're able to know more about and then do something with. I didn't invite her to go back to the paper because she's now experiencing it inside her, but another way of kind of completing that would be to invite someone again to put it on their paper. Just before we move on to the next, in fact, forgive me, Misha, maybe you could pop something in the chat about what that experience was like for you. And given the time, I'm just going to finish off on the other areas that we've gone through. What to do when the coachee is stuck? Well, in fact, we did have some examples and I was able to demonstrate it. I would just start by challenging you. Just because the coachee doesn't instantly come up with an answer, it doesn't actually mean that they are stuck. This process relies on silence and giving somebody time and just reflect back their own words. And often people will discover their own solutions. We heard that nicely with Becky when she didn't have her plan. And if they say don't know, you can ask another question and also use this. And when you don't know, what would you like to have happen? It might sound a little bit long-winded, but David Grove developed this actual phrase, this particular set of words, because it does tend to land deep with someone and help them to actually get to what they want instead of the problem. So moving on, ending with a clear action plan. It'd be lovely to do a very quick demonstration of this. It's perhaps a little bit more coach-like. We've only got a minute to go. I might just do a little demo with myself and demonstrate how it might work. So a different set of questions, having done all what you've done already. So we got to Misha saying that it's about accepting that she can do these things. And so I might have asked Misha, what needs to happen for accepting you can do these things? And she might have said, forgive me, Misha, this is not about you. I'm making up a fictitious story now. She might have said something like, well, perhaps I need to write a list of all my good points and keep that somewhere nearby. And I can then say, and can you write a list like that? Well, yes, I can. And then how will you do that? How will you write that list? Well, I first need to put aside some time. Okay. And can you put aside some time? Yes, I can. When will you put aside some time? Well, I'm going to do it today. And is there anything else that needs to happen to accept those things? And again, we can cycle around, or we could go back to what was said earlier. You know, the actual end result was deciding on where my journey is going. What needs to happen for deciding? Well, I need to accept, and that may have already happened. And is there anything else that needs to happen? Well, I realize I need to, maybe go back to open my eyes. Can you open my eye? Can you open your eyes? Yes. And how will you do that? And when will you do that? So again, we have an iterative process in that we kind of cycle around these same questions. You could be exploring what needs to happen for a metaphor, or it could be right back to the real world. So again, if we take Becky, what needs to happen for you to have your plan? Again, we could look at what comes up from that. And each of those might need some more unpicking. And if we get a I don't know, or I can't do that, you know, somebody might say what they want is for their boss to give them a promotion. Well, what needs to happen for the boss to give you a promotion? Well, he needs to recognize how important I am. And can that happen? Well, it could do. Well, what needs to happen for him to recognize, well, I need to do X, Y, and Z. So what tends to happen is by following through these questions, it comes back to ownership, whatever the outcome might have started with. It'll come back to doable actions that are totally owned by the person. So I've gone through that very quickly, as a lot of what we've covered today. But I do hope that you're getting a taste of what clean is all about. And it is only a taste. We've touched the tip of the iceberg today. I hope you've also got a sense not only of the importance of the questions and how you phrase them, but a lot of this is about your mindset. You need to be dedicated to only ask clean questions, keep everything else out of the picture, mirroring back the actual words that the other person uses, not paraphrasing, slowing the whole thing down, allowing that silence for new information, new knowledge to percolate up. And given all that, to be present and really listen, because you're not busy thinking about your next question. Once you've learned these questions, it makes it very easy to stick with it. I said at the beginning about where this has all come from, but let me just say again, the originator of clean language and all clean processes was New Zealand psychotherapist David Grove. So what now? You might like to reflect what you know now about clean coaching after all of this and what needs to happen next. My suggestion to you is that you practice, take away these questions. If you get a practice buddy who'll work with you, and also just try with your friends, colleagues, and remember, although it's simple, it isn't easy. Notice how you will want to say something else. I'd love to keep in touch with you. You can visit our website, sign up to our newsletter. We send out lots of little tips, news, details of events if you're interested to know more about clean. As I said at the start, we do have a program, a foundation level program starting on 24th of May. We do have a discount on at the moment for the next few weeks where you get it at a reduced rate. And that is that. So I'm going to stop share. I think we're bang on time. I've probably lost most people, but anyone still here that has anything they'd like to say before we end? Anything they'd like to ask?
A question about sharing the slides. Will you be sharing the slides?
How can I do that? If you drop me an email, I can definitely forward you the slides. That's doable, and the session has been recorded, so you can watch back and see the recording as well. But yeah, if anyone wants to drop me an email, of course I'll happily send them through the slides. Okay, and I will stop the recording now. Thank you so much.